Hello everyone, Vincent Vin The Human here with a special interview edition of Sorta My Podcast. But first, like our nerd news page Sorta My Comics on Facebook and follow Sorta My Podcast on Instagram. Check out Subject to Change Entertainment on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe on the YouTube and SoundCloud channels. If you're checking this out somewhere, while here, why not like, comment, and share? Guys, my guest today is artist and graphic designer Rob Dumo. Thanks for joining me today, Rob.
Thanks for having me.
First, I'd like to kick things off by digging into your secret origins a bit. How did you first get into comics, and what were some of the titles you latched onto early on?
Well, I kind of got into comics around the heyday of Image, and when they were coming up in the 90s, and all of those books, my parents actually got me started when they bought me just like one of those like random packs of yes. 15 or 20 like non-sequential comics.
Yes, I know them well.
Yeah. So I got those for like a birthday or Christmas or something because I knew I was like into art, and it hit me and I was just immediately hooked, just like how good all this artwork was, and from then it just blossomed from there on.
Yeah, and those early Image titles, they really let their artists run wild. They let them just express themselves. And I think we weeded out some of the rougher ones, but we got a lot of great ones out of that.
Yeah, like Jim Lee was like one of the ones that like really hit me, at that time. And I also was like really big into like, some of the Marvel comics that came out at that time. X-Men and Age of Apocalypse series was one of the ones that like really, got me into like sticking with a title and, just absorbing all of those books that, came together. And there were lots of great artist-writer teams, all the different ones.
Yeah. And I've always found that in hindsight fascinating, the way that things were in the 90s with the books, because that's when you really saw a resurgence in the X-Men. And it kind of split people into two factions. Either you were pretty much reading the X-Men, or you were probably off doing something else, because they had stories that would span like 4 different titles, maybe more sometimes. I know that was what warded me off early on. So I was like, I can't keep up with all this. But looking back, those were some of the best stories going on at the time, getting to read them in trade form.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, at the age that I was, I definitely couldn't keep up with them. But the comic shop that was near me had like a 25-cent bin, where like I could scrape together my change and just like get whatever was in there.
Yeah. Now, when did you first notice you actually had a talent for art?
Really early on. Like my mom likes to say that, my teacher used to yell at me in kindergarten for coloring in my phonics books. So like, they have the little workbook where you do all your lessons and stuff, but there's like pictures of things in there that are black and white. And so I would finish my lessons and I was like already like, moving on to working on that stuff. Yeah. But it was pretty consistent, through all of my childhood, something that I just stuck with and was always kind of working on.
Okay. So you're already drawn, comics have come into play. Tell me how this all led to you getting to your start in the industry and eventually working with Broken Icon Comics.
Well, I kind of, just like made my own comics on my own, kind of just like drawing on regular 8.5 by 11 like copy paper or whatever, and folding the pages together and taping or stapling them together, coloring with colored pencils like when I was in high school and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
eventually, once I got, into college, I started pursuing, actually doing books and stuff. And so, like, I got on, pages like Digital Webbing that had a forum for, help wanted. And yeah, it was great. This was years and years ago, like early 2000s.
Yeah, the early days of the internet.
Yeah. So I'd hook up with like, individual writers and do like a short ash can here and there, and, lots of projects that never went anywhere, or never actually got published. And then eventually I finally ran into the guys with Broken Icon who are like just starting the publishing company up. You know, when I talked to them, they were really motivated, and I answered an ad through digital webbing that they had, but they were super motivated, offering a small page rate, but it wasn't back end. You know, wasn't completely back end. So it was something that I knew I was actually going to get some money for, at least, you know, when we first started out. And you know, they had a lot of stuff going on, and they gave me a choice of a couple of titles, and from then on, you know, we just ended up doing a lot more work together because they followed through on everything.
Awesome. Now, I know you do a lot of caricatures too. Why caricatures?
Well, I actually started doing caricatures when I was in high school. I'm from Batavia, New York, which is like pretty close to Buffalo.
Okay.
And there's a theme park there called Darien Lake, which used to be a Six Flags. So the company that ran all the art operations out of there came to my high school to recruit. And so, like, I'd never drawn a caricature before, but it seemed like a cool job. It was way better than what I was doing, which was food service, you know, at the time.
We've all been there.
Yeah. So I was like, well, you know, like, I don't know if I can do this, because I, you know, never had, like, you know, I was drawing comic book stuff, or like I mostly did like realistic, you know, portrait kind of stuff, but I wasn't sure if I was good enough. Like, I never considered myself like to that level.
Yeah.
But the manager there was the guy that's like super into comics. He actually has like a nerd folk band called Odle the Mock, and they do like lots of like songs about, you know, comics and sci-fi and all that stuff.
That's awesome.
So he had looked at my portfolio and saw like my comic books and was just like, "You're hired," like immediately. But I got to learn from him on how to draw caricatures at the park, and so I did that all while I was in school and college. You know, it's like my summer job.
Yeah, there are definitely worse ones you could get, and you're still doing those up to this day.
Yeah, eventually I ended up managing at the park, and then I realized that it was something that could be done on a freelance basis, doing private parties and things like that. So I ended up doing that a lot more, and then eventually moved on to strictly freelance. And so that is like my side job to this day, to comic books.
That's really cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break for a little Tricon ad we have, and then we will be right back with Rob.
Where is Odle at, man?
I don't know, man. He's always talking about how he needs to be out of here by a certain time. We make accommodations.
It's already 7:30.
I know.
Whoa! Guys, we had such a blast.
What are you talking about?
Did you just come out of the portal?
Yeah, I think we're skipping over that fact.
Oh, there's no time for that right now.
That was uncalled for.
Guys, Tricon.
Oh, okay. What is that? Where
Is that
where
a Comic-Con?
It is the Tri-State Comic Book Convention, June 2nd, Huntington, West Virginia, Big Sandy Superstore Arena.
Okay, well, these comic book conventions are always money pits, man. Can we really afford that?
No. This one is only $10 for admission. Kids under 10, get in free.
Wow.
Yeah.
But is it, okay, that cheap? It's got to be just like boxes of comics as far as the eye can see. Nothing really worth seeing.
No. We've got vendors, we've got artists, we've got some pretty stellar media guests.
Whoa.
There's going to be a cosplay contest. The winner just...
Who was it?
You got to be there to find out.
Well, let's get our tickets right now, then.
Come on, guys.
Let's jump in the time warp.
All right, we're back. So, I saw the Rob Dumo infomercial. Consider me sold.
Yeah.
How did that become a thing?
You know, I'm not really sure how that became a thing. Eric he's a funny guy, and he just like comes up with these random ideas sometimes at conventions. And, you know, we were hanging out at the hotel like after a convention, and, you know, he just, you know, he came up with it. He's like, we're gonna do this, you know. And so it was very, you know, improvisational, and he just like came up with this idea of how he was gonna have this commercial about me for some reason. That's
really great. I can appreciate that too. Some of my earliest stuff is just off the top of my head skits and a few infomercials even, and that stemmed out of us becoming obsessed with Jackass videos. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so I could definitely get on board with that thought process. Now, your credits include Thoughtless from Northern Lights Comics and The Broken Icons, Nightmare Unknown. Tell me a little bit about those books.
Thoughtless was the first book that I ever did that actually got into print. And I did that with a guy named Richard Zajac, who is an inker, and that was like his creator-owned thing. You know, he's done some stuff with like Devil's Due back in the day, a little bit of like G.I. Joe for them, inking and stuff like that. And I think I ended up hooking up with him through digital webbing too in those days. So that was my very, very first one that actually got, you know, a print run. And then Nightmare Unknown was the first one that I did with Broken Icon.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that was like one of like two different titles that they had like, said I had the choice of, and it supernatural noir is like how they described it, and it sounded really cool and different and neat. So I was like, yeah, let's do that one.
Yeah, that does sound pretty interesting. I've always been a sucker for noir stuff, especially Spider-Man noir. Man, you took Spider-Man, you took noir, you threw them together. You had my money.
Yeah.
Any upcoming projects you got going on?
So we've got a couple of new books coming out in time for Tricon. We have one called SPF, which is like a cross between steampunk and fantasy. So it's kind of this world that exists where the fantasy world has like lost out to technology and like a big war. And so it's kind of the exploration of these like two different factions, between like, some friends and these fairies who actually are like, steampunk mechanics and stuff like that. And one of their friends who is on the lam, as someone from the world of magic, which is now like kind of outlawed.
Huh. All right. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, so we've got that one, and that's with James Maddox. And I also have a zombie short coming out with James, and that is going to be double-sided flip comic, where our story is on one side, and it's called The Long Letter Home, and we have another story, on the other side of the book by Gavin Smith and Chris Charlton.
Wow, you don't see those very often anymore. Marvel used to do those a lot back in the day.
Yeah, it's one of these things where we're friends with these guys, and we both had these zombie stories that are not quite a full book on their own. So we thought we'd put them together and just like a little one shot together.
Yeah, why not?
And I don't think I'm going to have this in time for Tricon, but I do have another book coming out called Kill Crazy Nymphos Attack. and
Right.
and yeah, I mean it's just what you think it is, pretty much. But it's written by Daniel Way and the Saska twins, and Daniel Way from Deadpool fame, obviously. So you can tell where the humor of the story is going to go with that. And the Saskas are film directors, so they've done a bunch of like horror films and stuff like that, like American Mary and See No Evil 2.
So this sounds very Ilsa of the SS inspired type thing.
Well, it's very it's kind of like a grindhouse, like exploitation film kind of like style, but it's like super funny and over the top, and it's a great fun. We did it off of a Kickstarter, but it is currently in production on getting ready to go to the printers. So
Okay. I hope it's done in time for Tricon. If not, I'm gonna have to track this one down for sure. I'm kind of a sucker for some of that trauma type stuff.
I'm
and definitely your audience there.
Yeah, and what's the guy's name who's the head of Trauma Films again?
Oh man, and I just heard him he just did an interview with someone recently too. I think it was Kevin Smith.
Well, he's in the book.
He's in the book.
Yeah, he was one of our contributors.
Yeah.
Lloyd Kaufman.
Yes.
That's what his name
yes,
is.
yes.
Yeah. So he was one of our contributors, and he got one of the spots to be put into the book. So Lloyd Kaufman is in the book.
Great. And he loves this type of stuff so much. He has such a passion for it. It really comes through in those interviews. You watch the DVD extras with him in it. He's a fun guy.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now I do have one final question for you, and this is kind of a what-if question. So, let's say Marvel and DC come calling, and you get your pick of the litter, but you can only choose one book from one company. Where do you go? What book do you choose? And who do you want to work with?
That is really hard. I mean, I can't imagine, even having that pick, because I would be, honored to do any of them, honestly. But I mean, I guess I'm not sure I could really choose between the two publishers necessarily. I've never been one of those guys that had, loyalty to one or the other. But, if it was Marvel, like maybe Spider-Man or the X-Men, those have always been my favorites. And definitely Batman for DC. Oh,
yeah. Batman's a fun one. And who would you bring on as your writer? Who would you want putting the words on the page?
I mean, if I had the choice out of, like, any writer out there, even though, like, I'm not sure that those titles necessarily, match, his typical style, maybe like Neil Gaiman or, like I've always loved his work.
Yeah.
Pretty much anything he puts out is gold.
I think he would work well with Batman. It'd be a little out there, and maybe it would have to be like one of those villain-driven stories, but I think that could work for sure.
Yeah, and I'd be totally on board for an out there Batman story,
Oh, yeah. You gotta shake it up with that one. Now, Rob, tell the good people where they can find you.
You can find me on my website, which is robdumoart.com, or on my social media, which is Twitter and Instagram, just at Rob Dumo.
Cool. Guys, this is going to wrap it up for us. Like this episode if you liked it. Subscribe if you loved it. Again, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Check out all of our links down below, as well as Rob's. And why not come out to his booth on June 2nd at Tricon? Guys, Tricon is this great comic book convention out in Huntington, West Virginia. $10 at the door. Kids under 10 get in free. Really, I've been to a few of these things. I'm telling you firsthand, you cannot do better for a price like that. It's growing every year. They're 6 years in now. So come on out, join Rob, join us, join all these other creators we've been talking to, and really show some love for the indie industry. Again, my name is Vincent Herman, Vin The Human. My guest today has been Rob Dumo, and cue that badass outro music.